In the 2010s, football brought what's arguably one of the most unique and impossible feats that we'll likely never see again. An entire era in which dominance was shared by only two individuals in the world, because Messi and Ronaldo were just so much better than any other around them, that the gap was unquestionable, a level so unreachable that had they not had the unfortunate pleasure of being around, some other generational talents might have been crowned the best in the world in any other era. However, before the world became divided between these once-in-a-lifetime superstars, before every online debate boiled down to Messi versus Ronaldo, there was a brief, almost unbelievable moment in football where one man forced these two anomalies to fight for second place. And he also did it in an era full of stars in every corner of Europe. And nothing quite sums up his peak more than this one simple goal, making the then mighty prime Manchester United look like a bunch of Sunday League fools, scoring one of the most graceful and unintentionally disrespectful goals in football history. Because at his best, the story of Kaká was just as such, making ridiculous things look simply effortless. Like his teammate and one of the greatest midfielders ever, Andrea Pirlo, once said, for 2 or 3 years, he was the best player in the world. There was a point where teams just had no idea how to stop him. And unfortunately, it was true, because what would eventually slow Kaká down was not any defender or tactic, but instead his own body. Like a star burning too brightly and too strongly, physically, he would eventually slow down, and he would end up burning out too quickly. So for the younger generation that never got to see him, this isn't nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It's a reminder that before Messi and Ronaldo reigned supreme in the footballing world, there was one final king before them, an artist whose genius was unlucky enough to have a legacy as immortal as it probably should have been. The brief but unquestionable magic of Ricardo Kaká. The interesting thing about Kaká's story is that it doesn't fit the chaotic archetypes of your typical Brazilian footballers. He wasn't raised in the favelas, nor did he claw his way through poverty or street football mythology. Kaká grew up in a relatively upper-class family of European descent, and it was that, plus his youthful appearance, that made many initially consider him to not be as tough, hard, or skilled as other rising Brazilians in his youth. That was until he got onto the pitch, and they watched him outclass everyone around him. Maybe he didn't have the traditional Brazilian flair, but undoubtedly he had the technique, touch, IQ, and composure that was ahead of every other teenager in the country. But at age 18, everything nearly ended. In a freak swimming pool accident, Kaká would fracture his spine. And when he got to the hospital, the doctors were clear. Paralysis was possibly on the table. His footballing career, his dreams, and his future would potentially be over. And looking back, Kaká later admits that the experience reframed his entire life. That moment changed everything. However, by some miracle or simply a stroke of fate, Kaká's spine would recover and avoid any major complications. From then on, he said, "I play because I wanted to enjoy the life God gave back to me." And that would really be the start of his religious journey. Sure, a lot of footballers are Christians, but Kaká is probably one of the best known examples of a Christian footballer. And from then on, he went to famously become one of the best and most positive influences of any footballer ever. So perfect that ironically, later in his life, his wife would even leave him for being too perfect. That's crazy. But ever since the accident, he played like someone who'd been given a second chance at life. The 19-year-old would go on to have 25 goal contributions in 31 matches, quickly building a reputation as one of the most technically skilled players in the Brazilian league as a teenager. But even then, when AC Milan paid 8.5 million euros for him in 2003, it was treated as sort of like a gamble on a talented but unproven youngster. Yeah, the prices back then were definitely not as insane as they are today. However, within weeks, Kaká would force his way into a midfield of Pirlo, Seedorf, Gattuso, and Rui Costa, players whose reputations alone would have intimidated most young arrivals. And yet, Kaká played with a calm authority and immediately set himself apart. Manager Carlo Ancelotti later put it simply, "We expected a good player. What we got was a phenomenon." In his first season, Milan won the Scudetto, with Kaká producing a total of 20 goal contributions. Incredibly astonishing for a 21-year-old midfielder fresh from Brazil. But what impressed Milan's veterans wasn't just his technique. It was the way he blended opposing qualities effortlessly. You wouldn't look at Kaká and think he was fast, but he had those long elastic strides of a sprinter that made him surprisingly fast. He had the creative brain of a classic playmaker, but he also had the touch, finishing, and instincts of a forward. And though his appearance might make you think he looks soft, Kaká was actually pretty big and decently heavy, standing at 187 centimeters or 6'1", running around at 180 pounds or 82 kilograms. Added with his speed and stamina, Kaká was all over the midfield, and he could press hard. Really, Kaká was the first of a new kind, a modern, hybrid, attack-focused midfielder who could not only play make and score, but was also physically imposing and had an incredibly high work rate. Truly, it's hard to find any kind of player with his sort of build and style, because if there are midfielders that play like him, there aren't ones with his build and his speed. And if there are guys with these same physical stats, maybe they're also great playmakers, but they weren't great dribblers and finishers like him. Throughout his rise, Kaká blurred the boundaries of what a midfielder and forward were supposed to be. In just his second season in Italy, Kaká would have a total of 28 goal contributions, including 2 goals and 6 assists in the Champions League, helping his Milan side beat Man United in the round of 16, Inter Milan in the quarterfinals, and PSV in the semi-final. However, unfortunately, that Champions League final did not go in Milan's favor, as Liverpool's infamous miracle at Istanbul helped them come back to win 2-3 in penalty shootouts. The 22-year-old Kaká was already one of the most important players in Milan. At that age, it was not normal for someone to be that productive playing behind the striker. But one really underestimated factor of Kaká's game was his dribbling. And it's so interesting because his long strides really deceives the audience. On TV, when he's dribbling, it seems like he's not that fast. But in real time, defenders saw something else entirely. Someone who ran with the ball as fast as some players run without it, all while being able to stay in control. And he would enter the 2006 World Cup as one of Brazil's crown jewels. And in a tournament where Brazil underperformed collectively, he was one of the few to shine, scoring a stunning long-range goal against Croatia and carrying Brazil's transition, and overall carried an aging Brazilian squad. Brazil was very attack-heavy, and their attacking legends like Ronaldo and Ronaldinho were getting much older, and they would eventually lose to one final Zinedine Zidane masterclass. And even though Ronaldinho had just won the 2005 Ballon d'Or, it was clear that Kaká was the best Brazilian in the world. Because despite Brazil's bitter exit in the World Cup, that past season in AC Milan, Kaká would provide a total of 30 goal contributions with 19 goals and 11 assists. And for Kaká, everything was pointing towards something special in the 2006-2007 season. In the round of 16, Milan found themselves unexpectedly struggling against Celtic. Their first leg matchup ended in a 0-0 draw. However, in the second leg, Kaká would put on a midfield masterclass, completely dictating the rhythm of the match, as well as scoring the game-winning goal to send them ahead. And it was there that they came across Bayern Munich. The first leg was once more a heated battle, as even though Andrea Pirlo and Kaká would score, Bayern Munich would equalize, ending the match 2-2. However, during the second leg, Milan and Kaká had much more control of things in the midfield. This time, they would completely dominate Bayern Munich, with heroics from Seedorf and Inzaghi ending the match 2-0. But this brings us to the semi-finals against Manchester United. And even though it was only the semi-final, it truly felt like the final. Cristiano Ronaldo would open the match early with a 6-minute goal, but in the 22nd minute, Kaká would come in and put a clean left-footed strike past Edwin van der Sar. Then, in the 37th minute, a long ball forward would flick between two United players, as Kaká would run in, carry the ball towards the box, and in the very last second, put a cheeky little header to get the ball in between defenders Gabriel Heinz and Patrice Evra, as they would embarrassingly collide with each other, completely confused and dumbfounded, as Kaká would take one simple touch, gather the ball, and calmly sink in another past Edwin van der Sar. At that moment, the United supporters were completely silenced, and although Rooney would score 2 goals later to end the match 3-2 in Man United's favor, Sir Alex Ferguson later admitted, "We simply couldn't handle him." Because even though United won that match, it was perhaps that moment that seemingly killed their confidence. Because in the second leg at Milan, Kaká would open the match with an 11th minute goal, and AC Milan never looked back, as they would dismantle Man United 3-0 and be on their way to the final. And finally, Milan would have the chance to get revenge on Liverpool for their infamous comeback in the Champions League final 2 years prior. And this time, Kaká didn't need to score. He would assist Inzaghi for the opening goal, and they would never look back. Throughout the entire match, Kaká and Milan controlled transitions, dominated the midfield, and kept Liverpool at arm's length. Essentially, Kaká had match-winning influence in every stage of the knockout rounds. So when December came around and Kaká won the Ballon d'Or in 2007, the gap was huge, a clear landslide victory over both Messi and Ronaldo. Ironically enough, in the following 2007-2008 season, from a production standpoint, Kaká would actually have the best season of his career, a total of 34 goal contributions in 41 matches. But that year, the Manchester United team that he had beat just the previous season were just way too dominant, with Cristiano Ronaldo taking that next level. But like I said, Kaká was still coming off his best individual season so far. That's why in the summer of 2009, Real Madrid paid 67 million euros to transfer him to Spain. And at the time, Real Madrid had been relatively struggling against Barcelona, and with the additional transfers of guys like Xabi Alonso and Cristiano Ronaldo. For Kaká fans, it felt like it was the beginning of a second peak. However, instead, it became the start of a slow and painful decline. In the season before his transfer to Real Madrid, Kaká would suffer an ankle injury and miss a total of 7 matches, being out of play for over a month. And early into his first season with Madrid, it would happen again, once more being out for a total of 30 days. But despite the injuries and having to adapt in a new league, Kaká would still have a very productive 21 goal contributions in 33 total matches played. That included 15 goal contributions in 25 La Liga matches, as well as 4 assists and 1 goal for 5 goal contributions in 7 Champions League matches. Prior to his injury, Kaká had 1 goal contribution for every Champions League match he played. So for Kaká, things were looking incredibly good, and maybe Kaká could have even fully recovered, if not for the fact that after his first season at Real Madrid was the 2010 World Cup. And despite Kaká already being a World Cup winner in 2002, he was just 19 years old and not a big part of the squad. In 2006, when he was the best player on the squad, he was playing with a much older squad and they exited in the quarterfinals. So in the 2010 World Cup, as a veteran, he wanted to lead his country to another World Cup trophy. Despite coming off back-to-back injury-riddled seasons, instead of choosing to rest and rehab, Kaká decided to push forward and play in the tournament. But looking back, it was definitely not worth it. Because firstly, in a match against Ivory Coast, Kaká would get red carded, all because an Ivory Coast player decided to flop and dive. Completely shameless and ridiculous, by the way, causing him to miss out on a match against Portugal, depriving fans of watching Ronaldo and Kaká face off. Then in the round of 16, while Brazil would destroy Chile, Kaká was visibly physically exhausted. Then in the quarterfinal against the Netherlands, with their trio of a prime Wesley Sneijder, Arjen Robben, and Robin van Persie. As Brazil would take the early lead, Kaká had the possible chance to seal the match with a second goal, a perfectly strike curling shot to the top corner. However, Dutch goalkeeper Martin Stekelenburg had one of the best saves in the entire tournament. And in the second half, Wesley Sneijder would score 2 goals to seal the victory and send Brazil home. So in hindsight, maybe Kaká should have just sat that tournament out, because shortly after the World Cup, Kaká would be diagnosed with meniscus damage, and this would cause him to miss a total of 29 matches, being out of play for 148 days, the most destructive injury of his entire career. And the saddest thing about all of this is that when Kaká did recover, he would have a total of 13 goal contributions in 20 matches, including 7 goals and 5 assists for a total of 12 goal contributions in 14 La Liga matches and 1 goal contribution in 3 Champions League matches. For context, that's incredibly efficient for someone who came back after basically missing over half the season. This injury would not only destroy his speed, agility, and quickness, but it would sadly take away years of his longevity. Because in the 2011-2012 season, despite moving like a ghost of his former self, Kaká would never lose that touch, vision, or playmaking, as he would have a total of 24 goal contributions in 40 matches. But where he really shined was in the Champions League, because throughout his entire career, the tournament in which Kaká has always shined the most and has been his most efficient has been in the Champions League. In this 2011-2012 Champions League season, he would have 3 goals, 9 goal contributions in 8 Champions League matches. Honestly, I don't think Champions League Kaká gets as much recognition as he really deserves, because in that Champions League campaign, he was absolutely on fire, despite coming off an injury that would completely destroy most careers. But the craziest thing is that despite his form in the tournament, during the semi-final first leg against Bayern Munich, Jose Mourinho decided to completely bench Kaká, and the result was Real Madrid losing 2-1. I mean, come on, benching the most informed player after Cristiano Ronaldo is crazy. Because in the second leg, Jose Mourinho did realize his mistake and start Kaká. But it was too little and too late, as Madrid would lose 3-4 in penalty shootouts. And sadly, by the following 2012-13 season, Kaká's body had just deteriorated more and more, as he only made a total of 27 appearances with 10 goal contributions. And it was around this time that Kaká would also suffer another muscle tear in his abductor region. And after this, his body would never really come close to recovering again, as he would leave Real Madrid, go back to play one more season in AC Milan, and by the age of 32, head back to Brazil to play one last season for his boyhood club, Sao Paulo. Kaká would eventually decide to end his career in the MLS, playing for Orlando City FC. And while he did show his skill, IQ, and overall brilliance, Kaká would still be riddled with injuries for every season he played in his brief 3 years in MLS. Although he never had the monstrous goal and assist numbers of Messi and Ronaldo, even though his body was breaking down in his late 20s, Kaká in his prime is one of the best attacking midfielders in history. A guy who can dribble and create his own goals, a guy who can shoot from distance, surprisingly fast and strong, an incredibly high work rate, and genius playmaking. He had all the traits you could ask for at that position. And while it was comparatively too brief and too injury-riddled to really outlast the test of time, put any of the all-time great midfielders beside him, and Kaká could have done what they could do and more.